The media told you this was going to explode. For the past 2 weeks, the narrative was everywhere. Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson couldn't coexist. Analysts broke down every tiny interaction like it was evidence of a locker room collapse waiting to happen. A missed high five, suddenly it meant tension. A college moment from years ago, framed like an ongoing feud. They pushed the idea that this backcourt was destined to fail before it even started. But here's the part they didn't expect. It took less than 10 seconds to destroy that entire storyline. In a raw, unfiltered practice clip, Clark pulls up from deep, logo range, effortless. The shot drops, but that's not what mattered. The camera shifts, and there's Raven Johnson on the sideline, reacting instantly. No hesitation, no awkward energy. She points straight at Clark and calls her the GOAT. Then she doubles down, posting it herself, making sure everyone sees it. Just like that, the narrative flips. Because this wasn't scripted, it wasn't forced, it was real. And in that one moment, everything the media had been building started to fall apart. The story everyone thought was coming never actually existed. For nearly 2 weeks, the media pushed a very specific narrative around Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson. They framed it like a ticking time bomb, 2 competitive guards, 1 spotlight, and no way it could work. Every small moment was dissected. A missed high five turned into tension. A past college interaction became unfinished business. They didn't just suggest conflict, they sold it. The idea was simple. This backcourt couldn't function. Not emotionally, not strategically, not long-term. Some analysts even went as far as saying the roster construction itself was flawed, like the organization made a mistake before the season even began. And once that narrative started spreading, it picked up speed. Fans debated it, clips were replayed, headlines leaned into it. The story became bigger than the actual basketball. It wasn't about how these players would perform, it was about whether they could even coexist. But here, where things get interesting. Because the entire argument was built on assumptions. There was no real evidence of conflict, no confirmed issues behind the scenes, just interpretations, speculation, and a lot of overanalysis of moments that didn't actually mean what people thought they did. And yet, it felt convincing. That's how powerful repetition is. When the same idea gets pushed from multiple angles, it starts to feel like reality, even when it's not. But the problem with manufactured narratives, they collapse the moment real footage tells a different story. And that's exactly what happened next. And then came the moment that flipped everything. No edits, no commentary, no debate. Just raw footage from practice. Caitlin Clark brings the ball up, takes a couple of calm, controlled dribbles, and rises from deep logo range. It's the kind of shot that instantly grabs attention. Smooth, confident, effortless. The ball drops clean through the net. But that wasn't the real story. The camera shifts, almost casually, and lands on Raven Johnson standing on the sideline. And what happens next? That's what nobody in the media saw coming. No hesitation, no awkward pause. She points directly at Clark and says it loud enough for everyone to hear. That's the GOAT right there. Not a polite clap, not a forced reaction. A genuine, immediate response. And then she takes it one step further. Johnson posts that exact clip to her own Instagram story, adding a GOAT emoji, making sure the message isn't just seen in the gym, but everywhere. That's when it became undeniable. Because you can't fake that kind of energy. This wasn't PR, it wasn't damage control, it wasn't 2 players trying to look good for the cameras. It was natural, real, unfiltered. And in that one sequence, everything changed. All the talk about tension, gone. All the speculation about chemistry issues suddenly looked exaggerated. Because instead of friction, what people saw was respect. Instead of rivalry, they saw alignment. And that's the part that hit hardest. Because the entire narrative leading up to this moment depended on the idea that these two couldn't share the same space, that one would have to step back, that ego would get in the way. But in less than 10 seconds, that idea fell apart. Completely. And what replaced it? Something far more dangerous for the rest of the league. What makes that moment even more powerful is the history behind it. Because this wasn't always how people viewed the relationship between Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson. Back in 2023, there was that viral clip, Clark waving Johnson off during a game. It spread everywhere. Social media ran with it. Fans turned it into a storyline overnight. And from that point on, people started building a narrative that these two had real tension. But it didn't stop there. In 2024, things escalated on the court. Johnson, now on a championship-level team, matched up against Clark on the biggest stage. And this time she delivered. Strong defense, big moments, and a performance that helped secure a title. To a lot of people, that looked like payback. And that's where the media locked in. They framed it as a rivalry, a personal battle, two players who had unfinished business and couldn't possibly share the same backcourt without conflict. It was dramatic, easy to sell, and honestly, it sounded believable. But here what got lost in all of that. Competition doesn't always mean resentment. Sometimes it builds respect. Because what those two went through wasn't personal, it was high-level basketball. Two elite guards pushing each other, testing each other, and growing through those moments. And when you step into a professional environment, that perspective changes fast. Which is exactly what we are seeing now. Johnson didn't walk into this situation trying to prove something. She didn't carry that college energy with her. Instead, she showed something far more important: awareness. She recognized greatness. She embraced her role. And in doing that, she removed the one thing the media thought would define this partnership: ego. That's not just maturity, that's rare. Because most players in that situation would hold onto the past, even just a little. But Johnson did the opposite. She leaned into the future. And that shift from rivalry to respect is what unlocks everything else. And that shift didn't just stay in practice, it showed up immediately on the court. When the Fever faced the New York Liberty, the expectation was clear. New York came in with size, experience, and a defensive game plan built entirely around stopping Caitlin Clark. Trap her early, pressure her deep, force the ball out of her hands. On paper, it made perfect sense. But what they didn't account for was Raven Johnson. Every time Clark got doubled, it created a numbers advantage elsewhere, a 4-on-3 situation that most teams struggle to execute. That's where Johnson stepped in and completely changed the dynamic. She didn't overthink it, didn't force plays. She caught the ball, read the defense instantly, and made the right decision every time. 8 assists, 0 turnovers. That stat alone tells you everything. Because against a team like New York, that level of control isn't normal, especially for a rookie. But Johnson wasn't playing like one. She moved the ball with precision, hitting shooters like Kelsey Mitchell in perfect rhythm, turning defensive pressure into easy offense. And the impact went beyond just passing. By handling those situations, she allowed Clark to do something even more dangerous: play off the ball. Instead of fighting constant pressure bringing the ball up, Clark could move freely, come off screens, and catch the defense off guard. And once that started happening, New York's entire system began to break down. They couldn't trap without consequences. They couldn't rotate fast enough. They couldn't keep up. What was supposed to be a strategy to shut Indiana down ended up unlocking them instead. And that's when it became clear. This isn't just two talented guards sharing the court. This is a system starting to work exactly how it was designed. And if that continues, it's going to be a serious problem for the rest of the league. But skill alone doesn't win games at this level, physicality does. And that's where Sophie Cunningham completely changed the tone. Because while all the attention was on Caitlin Clark and the backcourt chemistry, something else was happening under the surface. The New York Liberty weren't just trying to outplay Indiana, they were trying to wear them down. Clark was getting pressed, bumped, and constantly disrupted off the ball. It wasn't just defense, it was a message. Make every possession uncomfortable, test her endurance, see if the rookie could handle it over a full game. And for a moment, it looked like that pressure might work. But then Cunningham stepped in. She didn't complain, didn't look at the refs. She responded the only way that matters in games like this, by matching that physicality head-on. Setting hard screens, clearing space, making defenders think twice before overcommitting. Every time Clark was pressured, Cunningham was right there, creating separation, absorbing contact, and forcing the defense to pay a price for being aggressive. And that changes everything. Because once a team realizes they can't just push you around without consequences, their entire approach shifts. They hesitate, they second-guess, and in a game built on split-second decisions, that hesitation is all you need. But Cunningham didn't just bring toughness, she produced. Knocking down key shots, spacing the floor, and turning physical play into momentum instead of frustration. That balance is rare. Most players bring either energy or efficiency. She brought both. And that's why her role is so important. Because while Clark creates attention and Johnson controls the flow, Cunningham provides the edge, the protection, the presence that keeps everything stable when the game starts getting physical. Without that, the system doesn't hold. But with it, now you're not just skilled. You're hard to play against. And that's when a talented team starts becoming something much more dangerous. But while everything on the court is starting to click, there's a serious problem building behind the scenes. And it could undo all of it. The Indiana Fever aren't just dealing with rotations or chemistry anymore. They're dealing with math. Cold, unforgiving salary cap math that doesn't care how well your team is playing. Right now, they have more talent than they can legally keep. The league rules are strict. You can only carry 12 players on the active roster. Indiana has 16 in camp. That means cuts are coming, no matter how well certain players perform. And this is where things get risky. Because one name quietly sitting on the edge of that decision is Justine Pate, a 6'4" sharpshooter who, in limited minutes, already showed serious upside. Efficient scoring, floor spacing, and a skill set that fits perfectly alongside Caitlin Clark. In today's game, that kind of player is valuable, which makes the situation even more complicated. There's been discussion around a possible workaround, using a developmental contract to keep her in the system without using a full roster spot. On paper, it sounds like a solution. But there's a catch. A big one. If Indiana goes that route, Pate isn't protected. Any other team in the league can step in at any moment and offer her a standard contract, and just like that, she's gone. No compensation, no second chance. And teams are watching. Organizations like the Phoenix Mercury and other rebuilding squads are always looking for players exactly like this, young, skilled, and undervalued. If Indiana exposes her, it's not a question of if someone makes a move. It's when. That's what makes this such a dangerous decision. Because the Fever aren't just trying to build a team, they're trying to protect one. And in doing that, they might be forced to take a risk that costs them a key piece before the season even begins. So while the chemistry is real and the system is working, the front office is now facing a decision that could change everything. And this is where the situation takes a turn most people aren't paying enough attention to. Because if the Fever make the wrong move here, they don't just lose a player, they lose a future asset for nothing. There's been growing discussion around Indiana potentially using a developmental contract to keep Justine Pate in the system while managing their cap situation. On the surface, it sounds like a smart workaround. But it comes with a massive risk. Once a player is placed in that category, they're completely exposed. No protection, no control. Any team in the league can step in and offer a full contract, and Indiana has zero ability to stop it. And the scary part, there are teams actively waiting for this exact opportunity. Franchises like the Phoenix Mercury are known for keeping roster flexibility specifically to capitalize on situations like this. Rebuilding teams, teams looking for shooting, teams trying to add size. They're constantly monitoring players who slip through the cracks. And Pate fits that profile perfectly. A 6'4" forward who can stretch the floor, shoot efficiently, and create spacing. That's not just useful, that's valuable, especially in a league where size and shooting are at a premium. If Indiana exposes her, it's not a gamble, it's an invitation. Because the moment she becomes available, there's a strong chance another team moves immediately. And just like that, she's gone. No trade return, no compensation, no second chance. That's what makes this decision so difficult. The Fever aren't just balancing talent, they're balancing timing. They have a roster that's starting to click, chemistry that's building fast, and a system that looks dangerous when it's flowing. But one wrong calculation, and they could hand a key piece to a rival without ever seeing her full potential. And in a league this competitive, that's the kind of mistake that comes back to haunt you. And just like that, the entire narrative has flipped. What started as a story about potential locker room tension has turned into something completely different. Instead of conflict, the Indiana Fever are showing cohesion. Instead of ego, they're showing alignment. And instead of dysfunction, they're starting to look like a team that understands exactly who they are. The connection between Caitlin Clark and Raven Johnson is no longer a question, it's becoming a strength. The offense is flowing, the spacing makes sense, and the decision-making is sharper than anyone expected this early. But at the same time, the biggest challenge isn't coming from another team. It's coming from within. Because while everything on the court is trending upward, the front office is facing a decision that could reshape the entire roster. Keep everyone, and you run into hard cap limits. Make cuts, and you risk losing valuable pieces that could help this team long-term. That's the tension now. Not drama, not rivalry. Pressure. Because this team isn't being judged on potential anymore, it's being measured against expectations that are rising fast. And once that shift happens, there's no going back. So now the question is whether this works. It's whether they can hold it together. Because if they do, this isn't just a promising team. It's the start of something real. And if they do, then everything we're seeing right now might just be the calm before a completely different kind of storm. Either way, the league is officially watching.